So when you're not building games, the easiest way to do output is we write directly to the console, system.out.println. Now that's fine, but in games you need something a little bit more obvious. People aren't going to look for a console somewhere. They need something that's in their face. They need something that's clear and it's very easy to recognize, so they can find the information very quickly because their attention is usually elsewhere in a game. The score or health or whatever it is that you're trying to draw their attention to in terms of output is usually a secondary thing that they're looking for. It's just kind of I quickly need to glance and then I can go back to the regular gameplay. Now sometimes that text that we display may come in other ways. So say for example they're playing a combat game and every time you hit an opponent a little number pops up above their head saying how much damage you did to that opponent. Something simple like that. Now it's not just going to be like straight text that you see appear on the screen. It's going to be graphical, it's going to be colorful, it's going to be some particular font that maybe the artist created from scratch. So we need to figure out how to do that. And in order to do that, we're going to use something called Graphical Text. Graphical Text is just like regular text, except we can change the look, the size, the style, and all sorts of information about it to customize it for our purposes in our games. So we're going to see a lot of stuff. What can we actually do with Graphical Text? Well, it's just for information display. That's it. And you're going to use it maybe in your HUD, your heads-up display, to display your score, your health, or whatever it is. And you might use it for in-game information while they're actually playing, as I said, like the health, like the damage you deal with somebody or whatnot. And we need a lot of particular information to actually do graphical text. There's a lot of parameters involved. The parameters that are involved are the following. So when we're looking at it, we have to display the text itself. You need to know exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. Now, let me just put on the draw command here. So what exactly are you going to be doing? What are you going to be displaying? That depends on your purpose. So maybe it's just a message to the user. Maybe it is like the score or something along those lines. So once you have the text, you need to decide what's the text going to look like? What kind of font is it? Is it like Calibri, or is it something like Century Gothic? Basically any font that's installed on the computer can be used for graphical text. Now you can even install your own fonts, but you just got to make sure that when other people use your game on their computers, that font also needs to be installed on that computer as well, or you're going to run into problems. So the text, the font. Next is the location. Where are you actually going to draw it on the screen? Now remember, our screens look like this. And our origin is in the top left corner, our 0, 0. And X increases as you move to the right, and Y increases as you move down. Now remember, whenever we did something like a rectangle or a line, or I guess a rectangle is a better choice, we always referred to the top left corner of the rectangle as its position. And then we gave it a width and a height. No weird things here, it's just standard stuff. And that's going to be the same for everything we do. So if we once we start drawing images, we're going to be drawing those images, and those images are going to be basically contained in a rectangle. Maybe they got a little dude here. And they're going to be basically contained in a rectangle which has a position. That position is always going to be that top left corner. The one exception to this rule is graphical text. Instead of the top left corner, imagine I'm putting out the message hello. Imagine that there's an imaginary rectangle that goes around this word hello. Instead of it being in the top left corner, in this case for graphical text, the location represents the bottom left corner. It's the one thing that's like this. Everything else is the top left corner. So when we specify an X and Y location for our text, we're actually specifying the bottom left corner of it. So we have to keep this in mind. So it's a unique situation. So outside of the location, we can also specify things like the color, and last but not least, the transparency. Most of these are actually very similar to what we've been doing before in terms of draw a rect, draw a line, draw ellipse, all these different things. They all usually have a color and a transparency and some way of denoting its location. So we're going to use this information to actually do what we want to do, which is display graphical text, of course. So how do we actually do it? There's a very simple command for it. It is draw.text. Very straightforward. And in the draw.text, it's going to require some certain values. It's going to need that graphics object, that one that we've been using for all the other draw commands. But then it's going to need an X, it's going to need a Y, it's going to need a font, one that we create, it's going to need a color in this order, and it's going to need the transparency level. All we have to do is call that simple process or procedure, and we'll see our text on the screen. So it's a two-stage process. The first stage is we need to create our font. The second stage, we just need to call draw.text. So let's start at the beginning, and I'm going to do this in Eclipse so we can actually see this working. So this is a basic game project which has nothing written in it other than the code that's set up when you first open up your project. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to create my font. So my font is made up of three pieces of information. What is the name of the font? So that's any font on your computer. As I said, go to Word to find these out, whichever one you want. Maybe it's Times New Roman, maybe it's Comic Sans, whatever it is you're interested in. And then you need the style. Is it going to be bold? Is it going to be plain? Is it going to be italicized? There's some combination in there. And then you need the size. How big do you want your font to be? How big do you want it to show up? So the size is going to be the number of pixels high each letter is. So let's create a font. And we do that using a variable. So the reason why we want to create a font variable is so we can actually reuse it later on. So we may want to display multiple things on our screen that all use the exact same font. So for example, all of like the like if you're doing like a top 10 scoreboard or something like that, you want all those outputs to be the exact same font. Or all your HUD elements, you want them to use the same font so they look consistent and pretty looking. So that's why we use variables, so we can reuse that variable in multiple outputs. So how do we do this? It's actually pretty easy. We're going to create a new variable, and its type is going to be font. You got to give it a name. So for me, I'm going to make my font that's just a message. So I'm just going to call mine MSG font, message font. And we are defining a new object. So we say equals new font. You know that you're creating an object whenever you see that new keyword. And now we got to give the font, or figure out what font name we want. Well, I'm a big fan of Century Gothic, so I'm going to put in Century Gothic, capital C. It has to be spelt right or it won't work. Century Gothic. If you don't know the exact spelling, open up Word and see what's available to you. Font style. Now here we have four options. We can write font.plain, font.bold, font.italic, or we can do a combination of font.bold plus font.italic. And that will give you bold and italicized. But for my purposes, I'm just going to make it plain. And then finally the size. How many pixels high? Let's make it 50 pixels high. So that's step one. Done. We have a font. If we plan on using more than one font in our program, then we just keep creating them right here. You could even have an array of fonts if you really wanted to. The next step is to draw. So down in our draw code, we need to call our draw.text method. Draw.text. You'll notice that there's two options. One of them, the one that we're going to use, uses exactly what I was talking about. First of all, we leave graphics alone. We don't touch that. Next, whatever text we want to display. Now this can be anything from a literal value like hello world, or it could be a variable. It could be a function call that returns the string, but it must be a string. So I'm just going to make it simple. I'm going to put a literal value. I'm going to write hello world. Oops. And then we need an X and Y. Let's keep it simple. I'm going to say 100 pixels over and 200 pixels down. The font, what font did I create? I created my font, which was called, I believe, MSG font, message font. Yep, MSG font. And now for color, now I can use any of the pre-made colors that we have in the helper library, or I can customize and make my own color if I want using the get color command. But for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to say helper.white. And transparency, let's just make it fully opaque for now, so 1F for float. And that's it. That's all we have to do. We run our program, and we see hello world show up 100 pixels over, 200 pixels down. Each letter capital letter, mind you, is 50 pixels high. So there's how we do graphical text. Very straightforward. There's nothing weird or fancy about it. That's it. That's all there is to it. Next up, we're going to learn how to do images and a few other things.